Okay. Hello, everyone. The title of today's episode is When Your Moment Reveals Its True Nature. And I am speaking generally at first, and I would like to go specific. And generally speaking, we as creatures experience life through moments. As we go through many moments, as the number of our experiences, in some sense, expand, and as we journey into time and forward into space, we in some sense create a sort of memory grid, a sort of memory pattern where we have access to our past vaguely, but to the capacity that we were awake in that experience. So what I realize is that I am this moment of being, like as a human being, like I realize I'm this moment of being, and I have chronologically organized images that I can recollect of the past as the past. I have in some sense given time design and space meaning. Excuse me. When I realized that I am the value giver and the shaper of the designs I extract from my perception, I felt a sort of existential emptiness. I felt that I could understand the universe as a void more than its fullness, as if I were to study everything in existence, that would be an impossible endeavor. But for me to try to study the absence of everything as if what I share in common with existence is space, you know? And so this was very fascinating for me, this notion that there is a part of our intelligence interpreting what is actually there in our intelligence. We are a sort of self-updating organism. And so we have updated ourselves through different technologies. And for example, the technology of this creature separating itself from the world in some sense, conceptually, like that was, I consider that to be the birth of a mind. You know, when there was a sort of individualization agreed upon or moved onto or into. So this moment, it holds within it a sort of image generation, a sort of image self generation, because it all comes from a sense of self, the first self, I call it. And what that means in some sense is that your past is how your mind creates images when you look to, like towards this axis you've created. It's as if when you wonder about what has happened, you can say your imagination is the past. You know, it's like it's your, we can call it, we can somehow certify it as memory. We can say when you try to look back at the past, you're in some sense imagining it energetically in that moment, as if like if you could say that to think in a certain way was a certain energy frequency, you know? So when a person tries to remember, it's as if they're not the same energy frequency, so there's a change, there's a sort of ignition to thought, ignition to memory. Energetically, I'm speaking about this, not in an energetically abstract way, as if there's multiple dimensions of energy simultaneously. But what I mean by this is that I'm acknowledging it as a being, let us say, not too sophisticated from our mainstream ideas of a human being, which in some sense stays away from supernatural explanations and in some sense fears the unknown that can crack its knowledge. But anyways, when the mind generates imagery and you're looking at the future, again, it's a sort of, it's as if the mind's creating imagery, just your attention is giving it a sense of past, future meaning, right? So it's as if there's some phenomena happening, and through this phenomena, we are interpreting the world, right? This phenomena is your existence. Now, your existence, there is the biological, physical body aspect of it. So, for example, touch your arm. Just somehow acknowledge that you have a physical body here. Now, the next thing you acknowledge is that you have, in some sense, an abstract body. This abstract body is how your identity can be concluded to yourself as you through one, you know? When you go close towards realizing what your source of intelligence is, who you really are, you begin to see who you really are is a collection and a certain sequential pattern of meaning you have extracted from different moments of experience. So these different moments of experience, as you kind of corner your ego and are commanding it, who are you? Reveal, like take off your mask, you begin to see from a multiplicity of phenomena, it's like a multi-dimensional system is creating one system. We are a simulation, not from some future, like from the future, like from an advanced machine in the future. We're being simulated right now, So in some sense, our future is our God, I'm not talking about like that. I'm just suggesting that it's as if we reach the core of thought, and it comes down to attributeless attention just being there. And this attributeless attention, it is in some sense the death of the ego, because the ego will try to hold on to any thought. So you got to think of it this way, that your thoughts aren't yours. It's not like your mind is creating them. It's like a river is passing. Like imagine there's like let's say very elegantly you're standing somewhere and just like thousands of birds are flying through kind of past you, and as they're passing, like you're in the middle of all these birds that are flying through and none of the birds are hitting you. It's like, let's say there's some sort of divine grace at work. And so all these birds are passing through and you have no thought or fear of these birds hitting you. But it's as if like each bird you look at is like a certain thought, as if in this vast movement of imagery, your attention is claiming something as itself. So the best way I can explain the relationship to thought is a metaphor that I kind of came out while I was giving one of these talks years ago. I've been at these talks for a while. I think it's going to be a while still, but but anyways, so what I'm trying to say is that imagine it's at night, right? There is a river, right? And let's say this river is filled with very, very magnificent colors, or let's just say it's a normal river, that's easier to visualize. So what happens is it's at night, you take like one of those nice flashlights, and you go outside and you turn on the flashlight, and suddenly there's like a spherical revelation of what was moving in the dark. So your flashlight is on the river, and you're seeing only the part of the river clearly where the flashlight is illuminated, right? So this is in some sense how thought, it comes into attention. There are worlds beyond our eyes and there are worlds in front of it. And this is the fascinating clue, that where are all these worlds being kept and why are they crucial? And they are crucial as far as we are conscious. So we have been trying to all physically survive, because Darwin was like, survive like the fittest, boys. You know, it's like, oh, everybody was like, yeah, you know, like they went into like war mode, you know. And I'm telling you, okay, you know, we cannot argue against the biology on the surface of a rock, okay? You know, but what I'm saying is that once we realize our attention is the projector of our world, is the source of it, we go study the attention and we realize we have been treating ourselves as just bodies that are howling brains that only they know 10 or 12% of it, or whatever that article was saying, you know? So what I'm telling you is we have been sold ourselves too short, you know? And what I mean by that is we have been trapped in ideas for too long. Oh dear mankind, never forget your eyes are open to every day once. Every turn of the earth is a new earth. For change cannot have a past or a future. So in some sense, when the person, through self-inquiry, through wondering who is holding the flashlight that is revealing these thoughts, that is allowing these thoughts to structure my reality, where are my beliefs coming from? How was this architecture put into my mind? The architecture of thought, the architecture of fixed views, the architecture of axiomatic principles you will never dare to change, because if you do, your identity will be destroyed. So this is the world we're living in. We either have to be people who look at the unknown. There's like, let me tell you something fascinating. You know, you see in some of these movies, for example, Independence Day or something, like when there's a threat that's attacking Earth, everybody suddenly becomes unified and kind or something. Like if it's like Armageddon, like the movie, a huge asteroid's about to hit Earth, suddenly all of Earth prays together, you know? And then if suddenly, imagine like, you know, if it's like an alien species invading, suddenly all these countries that are fighting with one another are like, okay, holy shit guys, let's put our wars aside. We have a bigger threat. We have a threat against species, our species continuity, right? So that's very crucial, right? That mentality. So what I'm getting at is that in regards to knowledge, the way people have different belief systems, there is an alien invasion. But this alien invasion is not an alien. It is what I would say the unknown. Like if I could say this, like this is the alien. It is what we do not yet know. You know, it is what you don't know. You have to make alien contact with it. I'm saying this very playfully, not alien. Like don't get into like supernatural, like New Age stuff yet. I'm not talking about like extraterrestrial consciousness and communication with it, because that is a huge talk, and that is something that if I were to give a comment on it, I have to in some sense build a landscape of my experiences first for you to truly comprehend my words. But what I'm saying is that just like what unifies man and has always unified man was the unknown, and what that means is every human being is in confrontation with the unknown. They don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. They don't know if they're going to be alive tomorrow or dead, or something's going to happen. They don't know if they're going to have their job tomorrow or not. And when I say tomorrow, I'm not saying literally like one day later. I'm saying like in the future. So we see the future is unknown to us. The past seems to be known. We look at history and we see history repeats itself. And so we realize all these patterns that have to some degree led to the behavior of the civilization. But then we look at the future of the civilization. We look at the front window of this vehicle called humanity that all, you know, this intelligence sector is moving through. You know, we are gazing into our greater self. And in some sense, how can I tell you, beyond the eyes of man, the soul has always continued its journey. And beyond the eyes of the soul, thought never existed and truth was whole. You know, so that's and truth was home. You know, this is a very crucial concept. You know, because at some point after, let's say, all your teachers who are dualistic, what that means is like anything you're learning from that's separate from you, that's a certain amount of your tutelage. Then there's a sort of inner learning that nobody can teach you, not a single, because it is impossible. That is why. This is why to have a spiritual teacher is a blessing in disguise. And in a good way. I'm not saying like there's of course a lot of people who scam people, and that's tragic. This is why I was like, oh my God, money has possessed people. Money is like the demon called greed, But at the same time, money is an energetic tool, It is not, imagery should not deny utility. Viewpoint should not deny truth. These are my claims. But anyways, I wanted to get to this notion that eventually the person, after, let's say you learn from your parents, then you learn from your friends, then you learn from society, then you learn from specific teachers throughout life, then you begin learning from your moment of being. And when you begin learning from your moment of being, you begin to realize if you are sincere, if you honestly want to comprehend your mind, you can't have a blind egotistical curiosity like a cat. Like they say, curiosity killed the cat, And I forget the man's name, but there was this very nice quote by a man who, I forget his name honestly, but the quote went something like this, that curiosity is the lust of the mind. So we don't want to have a curiosity as an idea, because then we'll be projected into states of doubt, states of fear. If you notice, states of doubt and states of fear usually have to do with a sort of individual sense of you, a sense of individual, like something. The teachers that reveal themselves in front of your eyes or out, like, in front of your ears, these teachers, they are there to be a sort of mirror of your own infinitude. So for me, external teachers, you're learning from the intelligence of a sense of other, but your internal teacher is you learning from how your moment is being your mind. Do you know how rare it is for a human being who's been conditioned to be a working animal, suddenly just stops being a working animal and wonders, what am I? What have they not told me? What has knowledge not still understood about the unknown? How does the vastness of the cosmos influence my perception? How does my universal perception influence how far I see the world stretch? Because what is hope? Hope is a parallel dimension coming into fruition in some form. That person who has hope in his mind, he sees his success. He sees, the book on the shelf in reach. That means truth is a parallel dimension which either we're journeying to or it's pulling us towards itself, or it's coming towards us. So this is the profound thing. Because we are creatures of experience, we are creatures of a classification of our experience, and the classification of our experience originates out of a spontaneous moment where a story accepts a certain character. When you become a character in your story, that is when you have emotions. Because this is the profound thing. As you go further back, as you reverse engineer, in some sense go through the rabbit hole of your ego, you kind of go through a sort of, at first, diffusion of your memory and imagination, but then a sort of melting of your thoughts, like snow in the melting sun, as some poets have said. So that's very crucial, because it is a sort of death of illusion, for truth has arrived, for truth has always been. We seek so much, and we can only hold so little because we are changing creatures. It's very fascinating. Who I was years ago when I gave a Mr. Within talk is not who I am now. The only thing that remains is Mr. Within. And conceptually I'm speaking, that means that intelligence in my eyes that is within me, that is unspeakably there, that through every birthday where I've looked at a new face in the mirror and blown that candle, it has been there ageless. It is just, its quality is just awareness. So as if your moment of being, which let's say you right now are your whole moment of being. So what that means is everything in your attention is a phenomena called mind happening, or whatever you like to call it, you know? So in some sense, your consciousness is your existence. And so it's an instantaneous relationship. This is why when we study existence to understand how consciousness moves, we cannot comprehend it, because there is no story, you know, to put it in, you know, the findings. So this is the mystery of, not perhaps like science doesn't realize it has a huge obstacle in front of it, how language has structured or provided the space for it. So if the language is limited, so will be the scientific results. Do you see? So this is why language should not be an obsession of a lifetime, should be a sort of telescope beyond thought, where meaning from one realm is being communicated to another realm, you know? By visualizing the whole world, you're simultaneously being the world and everything in your mind, you know, everything in your moment. So this is phenomenal. This is phenomenal that you suddenly realize the thin ice your personality has been existing on. And once that thin ice breaks, you will reach a state where I call it the state where no man can lie, the no man lie state. No man can lie in this state of being, because it is a raw experience of life. Your lies are only out of an indirect sense of you. Whenever you lie, it's as if you open in space and time a parallel reality of a version of yourself that has not been full in that moment. And that is what sincerity is. This is where the greatest friendships, the greatest relationships, the greatest journeys, the greatest adventures begin. They begin when people are sincere and they accept their energetic expression, their energetic manifestation as, you know, an intelligent expression, being, you know, an existential expression as an oh my god, as an existential expression. So what that means is, you know how they say like, oh man, you know, there's still racism, sexism, all these isms, all these separations, all these stereotypes. Well, let me tell you, there comes a moment when your true nature brings you an inner apocalypse. It brings an inner apocalypse to your bias, to your prejudice. You look at the world stunned because your past has been broken in the face of a future that never existed. So what that means is your mind in some sense detaches from the ideological creation it has done for how it thinks the future has been, and then it detaches from how the past has been, and it's like a simultaneous supernova of stepping out of duality into non-duality. Again, the non-dual self teaches the dual self. And it is teaching it through absence, through space, through the formless that gives form meaning, through the darkness that gives light clarity. Honestly, our species is literally, if you could imagine, I'm being very playful here, okay? Like, I hope nobody takes this too seriously what I'm going to say. But I'm talking about, like, let your mind animate itself in new ways playfully. You know, Aristotle has this nice quote. He says, it is the sign of an educated mind to entertain a thought without accepting it. So I in some sense will respect people. I mean, I respect everyone to some degree of an equal existential value, which was the point I was going to make, which I'm going to get back to. But what I'm saying is that authentic listeners are better than people who are looking for something. Because in authenticity, there is a sort of contentment, and contentment in some sense has an element of gratefulness in it. And that element of gratefulness is enough to keep you honest. And to be honest means that you have to, in some sense, purify yourself alchemically and conceptually, as if you're turning lead into gold by having all the elements of lead transform into gold. As if the caterpillar cells all die and then the butterfly cells begin to emerge. Right? So in some sense, a transformation from a sort of elusive reality into a more tightly connected to your direct experience sort of reality. So we transcend a sort of stereotyping of reality, a sort of classification and segmentation of meaning of different parts of what we see. And we realize everybody is an existential, energetic expression before their body, before their thoughts, before their face, before their ideas, before whatever it is that comes, that is extended out of their intelligence. So we can say, everybody can to some degree agree that if you exist in this universal sector, if you're existing now, you know, you're alive on this planet, you are an intelligence in this area where the planet is, you know, in this orbit of profound, you know, evolution, you know. You know, it's like an orbiting evolution. Which is very fascinating because our consciousness spirals, but the planet orbits in a circular way. You know, that's fascinating. I feel our minds are from a different, you know, universal sector, as if like our minds are from Andromeda, but our bodies are from the Milky Way, you know. I'm being playful though. It's very interesting. Sometimes when I give these talks, it's like I feel like I'm marching with an army of, like, allow nature to do the work that it is here for, to realize that a lot of life is being taken into pressure. You know, you gotta be free inside and outside, which means you need to be able to allow yourself an opportunity to extract out the most efficient, clearest, and beautiful meaning. So when chaos becomes beauty and order becomes beauty, then beauty becomes beyond chaos and order. And you become the eyes of existence. You become a moment that out of all the moments that are manifest, out of all the people who haven't even been born yet, you are here, you are here. You have attended the greatest party that consciousness could stand in, you know, could attend. You are the magnificence of the greatest inspiration of intelligence on the surface of a material universe. Because the mind is multidimensional, the body is just in one dimension. What do you want me to say? You know, your body, like here, I'm touching a table, you know, this is like I'm knocking on wood, you know. You know, but what knocking on wood means, and a sort of storification of action, of object, just atoms moving, like we're storifying atoms, like we got to be honest with ourselves. So what is everything in knowledge is a tree made of words, and these words are in some sense symbolic. Like we chose to give a symbol a certain meaning, and we went towards this complex way of understanding, you know. Let me tell you something that the youth doesn't see. And when I say the youth, like any person who considers anybody more youthful than them, what the youth doesn't see is the lack of freedom they're given to be themselves. Many people avoid responsibility, rather realizing it is the opportunity of a lifetime to exist and do it in advanced, organized ways. But the problem is that I remember speaking to the mayor of a small town in Iran where people would go to a beach, like they had a beach there. It's called Shomal, you know, Chalus. And I remember my father was there, but you know, like I attended, and a question was raised: what is the how will society be in its best way? And the mayor was a very, educated and honest guy, very, good-natured guy. And you know what he said? He said, when people are honest, because you cannot experience a true civilization unless there is a sort of pure level of common honesty. And it's not hard because we all agree the earth is round. So why can we not all agree that we should acknowledge a peaceful reality? We should live efficiently than inefficiently. And violence is inefficiency in a world where genius requires peace to step out into the world. A lot of our greatest ideas are inaccessible as long as there's violence. I was like, there was a sort of tragedy, when I saw that some countries are being bombed and children are dying on the masses. Like, there were immense tears, as if I could not only see my own tears, but I could see the tears of the universe crying because confusion and violence and greed has allowed, those are not just children, they are unique minds that were destroyed. When you bomb a nation, you're killing geniuses among them. You're killing the greatest ideas that could have stepped out. And that is tragedy, because the death of a body is the death of a mind. And a mind is an opportunity. Your intelligence is an opportunity, and you have the obligation and responsibility to study it. And that's where, I want humanity to kind of get to. To get to a point where they see that the moment reveals its true nature, and this is where the talk gets nice, through action, through inaction. So when it comes to studying your moment of being, I stand humbly before many great teachers, on external teachers, from the words of Lao Tzu, from the words of Rishi Vyas, from the eyes of Rishi Vyas, from the Tibetan masters to the Sufi saints, from the Christian, mystics to modern poets. We are all children of starlight, and our eyes open based on our greatest effort. That's how far you will go, based on how far you're willing to go. And your will is how you have a way of maneuvering energy. By the way, when I give these Mr. Within talks, by the way, I bring up the concept of an ego. Like, the ego is not a bad thing. The ego is like a vehicle, pretty much. Like, you can't say your car is good or bad. If you drive drive it in a careless way, well, it's bad. But if you drive it well, it's good. So in some sense, you got to be self-aware while you're being aware of others. And so in meditation, they brought up this concept through breathing. And by you being aware of your exhalation, inhalation all the time throughout the day, you attain a sort of subtler alertness, a sort of subtler awareness where you're acknowledging your body while moving and while acknowledging other bodies. But then eventually you will realize, by having your attention on an inner task, the outer task becomes secondary, so karma goes to the side. It's like you don't experience pressure. So when we see, like, let me tell you, the moment miracles happen based on purity level. Purity level is based on simplicity that is resonating at the frequency of innocence and a source of mature virtuousness. I could tell you something very profound. All people go to the grave, but some people never die. which means before physical dissolution occurs, literally your physical composition, like the elements. I like to be old school about this and acknowledge it, in an ancient Vedic way, where the universe is made of elements. And these elements include fire, water, earth, wind, air. And then the fifth element, which is kind of keeping all these elements together, is ether. And when I look at an element, I see it display an intelligence, a sort of movement, a sort of transformation. But then I wonder, what about the fifth element? What about ether? How does ether come into place? And I see ether is the changing glue. It is how space is changing, but because it has no form, it is not recognizable. But intelligence navigates through it in changing ways. I remember in my poetry early on, this is like 2000. 12-ish, I don't know, 11-ish, 13 or something. Like at that time in my poetry, something came out as if like the spiritual, let us say in quotation, spiritual dimension of outer space is like mountains of energetic change. And I don't know how to tell you, but our universal sector, we pilot through it through a sort of mountain acknowledgement, as if like different sectors of space have different mountain elevations, and these mountain elevations are in a non-visible realm, but they have an energetic influence. And so there's ways of maneuvering and navigating as a conscious being that is yet unexplored to us, but a way of kind of elaborating it would be as if that we are for now depending on matter and time and space for navigation. But consciousness has an ability, or your awareness of self, your awareness is like this glass orb, and what colored cloth or surface it moves under, it takes the shape of it. So in some sense you realize that the attributeless aspect of your intelligence can originate any attribute. When you attain that state, you become like your mind gets multi-presence, or let's say playfully, I think religious texts hinted to it as omnipresence. This omnipresence, of course, I don't want to call it omnipresence. Let's call it multi-presence. You just experience yourself in multiple multiple ways, as if like for your mind, just like how in the subatomic level of reality in regards to quantum physics, an electron can be perceived in two locations simultaneously, like there's an idea like that. So similarly, you begin to see that you can have two different senses of existence simultaneously. You begin to see that there is a multidimensionality to conscious self-thought. The mind kind of displays itself as a moment of phenomena, right? So this phenomena is at the mercy of your interpretation and its outcome in some sense. For this talk, I kind of chose this picture, There was this website, Alpha Wallhaven. In that on that site, when I saw this picture, this is from what was it called? What was the movie? Blade Runner 2049 or something like that. I don't remember the exact number, but it's very interesting because you can begin to see in this picture that this man's desire is a giant standing in front of him in some sense. It's not the desire of him, it is the desire of the marketed world. But in some sense, you can see that we are confronting giants at times, but these giants are the depth of our emotional, how deep our emotions influence us based on the thoughts that we ascribe to them. Because emotions can generate thought, but also thought can generate emotion. Which means that they're in some sense like in the same room. The moon kissed the hand of the sun when it realized none of its light belonged to it. Moonlight was the sun's truth. Reality is an invisible obstacle. Visions of greatness must be carried and passed down like great torches and beacons that never needed to go out. The unknown pushed us into new forms of knowledge. In some sense, we must ask, what is knowing truth? And if the soul of mankind could speak to you, it would say, live for life, live for life. That is the only way to find me, to find your true self. After billions of years, we are left responsible for a scientific experiment, the science project called humanity. Humanity is this kind of machine-like, biologically influenced system of living. So our system of living is in some sense bringing, suggesting our humanity. And our system of living for now has different variations, as if you could listen to the ideas of every human being in every part of the world, their ideas would be so unique, where you would think as if the planet was a brain, different parts of the brain are lighting up in different ways. You know, if humanity's mind is based on the minds of individuals. And I don't think overpopulation is a problem. I mean, of course, physically it can be, but I feel that we will also generate minds. Like, for example, you know, imagine like Elon Musk was never born. You know, it would be one of those things where we'd be like, ah, why? You know, like I'm very happy there's people like him out there, you know, people who have a sort of, as if like they've been their honest self since childhood, but they are in the worlds of lines, you know, in the wilderness and the chaos of change. You plunge into change, realizing you are your own universe. It's phenomenal, actually. I want to share some stories now. Some ancient stories. There's this ancient Vedic story where there's this disciple in India, you know, and there's a guru by a tree, and there's a bunch of disciples, like 3 disciples, and there's this guru. And the guru tells one of the disciples, he's like, hey man, can you go get me some water from the pond, you know, from the lake? Not the pond, probably, from the lake. From the river or something, I don't know. Like, get me some water, you know, it gives the guy a bucket. You know, it's like bring water for everybody, you know. The guy has listened to this guru in ways where, because he's been in some sense astonished by his viewpoint, he respects the guru, and so he's like, sure, you know, he has no ego about it. He goes, you know, and he suddenly gets to the place where there's water, and he puts his bucket in the water, and he's seeing the bucket just get filled with water. And as he's seeing this, he suddenly looks to his side, and he sees the most beautiful girl he's ever witnessed, to a point where he's like, oh my God, am I doubting my yoginess? You know? And this girl is so beautiful and her beauty is like divine in some sense to him. So the man just runs up to her and it's like, I want to marry you. Let's get married. I love you. You know, something like this. And of course, women back in the day were like, okay, this is something that never happens. Sure. But nowadays, you know, it's not that common. You know? And so what happens is that the girl tells the guy, I will marry you, but you must get permission from my father first. You know, it's like old school times, you know. And so what happens is the man's like, sure, let's do it, you know. And and the girl's like, this is what's gonna happen. I'm going to go pee. The girl's smart actually. The girl's like, you have to speak to my father first, and I'll be listening from the corner of the door, you know, outside. I'll be kind of peeking and hearing what you're gonna say. And so the guy's like, all right, let's do this, you know, and he's in some sense genuinely in love with this girl, you know, even though it's like in Farsi we have a word for it where we say nadid badid in like the language of Iran, you know, which means that as if like this guy hasn't been out there that much, so he's like the first fish he finds he thinks is like the best fish. But I'm not. I'm sorry. Like I'm not saying this in you know, in a derogatory way. I'm saying this in a playful way. Anyways, what happens is they continue. So the girl takes the guy's hand, and they go to the village. You know, and so the girl. What happens is the guy goes in there. The father is like, "Okay, who are you? You know, tell me what's your education." And you know, this man thinks for his moment, and he's like, "I've studied psychology." You know, and of course he's done that, like he's been a guru, he's been a disciple, you know. And anyways, whatever, he says something, and the father eventually says that, okay, you seem like a decent guy, you seem like a calm and gentle person, you know. And so, okay, you can marry my daughter in one condition: you never leave this village, and you will live here with us. And when I die, you can own all my land and be like they had a term, the Khan, like the you know, the kid. How would I say? What's the term? You know, the person with the most majority land owned in the town. You know, something like that. And so the guy looks at this and suddenly thinks about his guru. He's like, "Oh my God, my guru's probably died by thirst by now." And so the guy says, "Okay, you know." He says, "Okay, I agree. This girl is too beautiful for me not to." And so what happens is very phenomenal, because suddenly the girl embraces him, and it's as if something unique and beautiful has entered their town. And so the guy lives a great and beautiful life, and becomes, the girl and the guy become so in love that they have two kids, you know. And so the father passes away, and so the guy is like wealthy and all this, you know. And so one day he's standing, you know, on a hill with his family, just enjoying the view, and they see the unbelievable, as if like a tsunami has hit, and the whole village is being destroyed by waves of water, and so is their house, and they're all on the hill, and they're shocked, you know, and the water is rising higher and higher, you know, and eventually one of the kids gets pulled in by the waves, so the other kid goes to save that kid, and then the mother goes to save the kid, and all three of them are kind of thrown in the water, and they're in some sense gone. And this man stands there shocked, you know, he stands there shocked and stunned, you know. And suddenly he hears a voice. He hears a voice that says, "Take the bucket out of the water." And it's the guru standing there. And the guy snaps out of it, realizing all that was a creation in an instant. In an instant, he experienced marriage, age, you know, children, death. You know, it was all an instant. And the guru's like, "Yo, man, it's taking you too long. You know, let's go." The crew's thirsty, you know. And so that's kind of like the story, right? That in an instant, time, space, and our journey is there. This is why I think Ikkyu, the Zen master, said the journey itself is my home. Oh, sorry, not Ikkyu, Matsuyo Basho. Matsuyo Basho, he said, another Zen master, he kind of said that the journey itself is my home. The journey is my home, you know? In some sense, in an instant, life is here with me. Life is me, you know? you know? So many people in this world around, different neighborhoods, joining different gangs, joining different things, but we're all in some sense kind of one clan of existential creatures in the vast unknown presence of space. We don't have time to fight. As long as we're fighting each other, we're kind of blind to greater problems. And so I remember Elon Musk actually saying something very nice, that it's like the hardest part of like trying to solve something or an issue or a challenge is to figuring out the right question to ask. And Mr. Within is saying the right question to ask can only be asked if there is a common, unified, like we create this universal code of peacefulness. But peacefulness doesn't mean it's telling chaos, it's putting chaos and order away. It has nothing to do with chaos and order. It just means that we must respect life's standing up from the dirt and evolution. When a person kills another person, like, how dare you touch a $1 billion, sorry, not $1 billion, a billion years, kind of evolutionary process like that? How can you destroy it like that, You won't believe it. Like, a lot of people go towards religion and sort of spirituality when they think about death, but I think about it scientifically. That it's been a long journey evolutionary. And so how can people in some sense use a bridge the wrong way? When such magnificence has opened its eyes after billions of years in such complex ways. Society is brilliant. It is brilliant in a manner where we're being pulled towards a digital realm of rebellion. Rebellion against the conditioning of a mind that was free from the start, because the end is where the start was. The game is over the moment the player is out of the simulation. You wake up from illusion into the clarity of your true nature, and your moment is the divine roar of just manifestation occurring. You're a poet of starlight. You're a prophet of the revelation of how your moment is being your moment. Learn from your own teachings. Learn from the mind that is the bridge between the soul and the body, and playfully speaking. Anyways, I hope this talk has served you. I hope that you will be sincere enough. That's all you need to do. Just be honest, and you will, in some sense, your moment will reveal its true nature, because you realize you can never be anywhere else. Your true nature doesn't need to obstruct truth, doesn't need to obstruct the direct experience with language or imagination or memory or any sort of abstraction. It is the presence of God in man's mind, for man has realized he is in God's mind, and so the non-dual and the dual are two wings of, in some sense, an eternal and attributeless bird. Actually, I won't say eternal, because eternity and an eternal experience and a temporal experience are again two wings of this bird. It is space's journey into matter. Our intelligence wasn't just physical. It in some sense materialized into presence. I hope this talk has served you. Clarity is its own instructor. Much blessings and namaste.